The elevator doors slid open with a whisper that felt like a gunshot. Alessia Moretti stepped onto the 47th floor of the Castellano Tower, her portfolio clutched against her chest like a shield, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her temples. The reception area was all black marble and gold veins, the kind of wealth that didn't just announce itself. It stared you down and dared you to be unworthy. She was definitely unworthy, at least by their standards. She knew that the moment the receptionist's eyes traveled down her body, cataloging every curve, every inch of fabric stretched across her hips, the way her blouse pulled just slightly at the buttons. The woman's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched a millimeter. That millimeter said everything. "Alessia Moretti," she said, her voice steady even though her palms were slick. "I have an appointment with the PR department." The receptionist, tall, razor-thin, blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, tapped at her tablet with one manicured nail. "Ah, yes, the stylist." The pause before stylist was deliberate, a tiny dagger wrapped in silk. "Please take a seat. Someone will be with you shortly." Alessia sat in one of the low-slung leather chairs, her thighs pressing against the armrests, and tried to make herself small. It was an old habit, one she'd been fighting since she was 14 years old, and her grandmother had told her that girls with her figure should learn to take up less space. She'd spent years unlearning it, years building a career out of taking up exactly as much space as she wanted. But this place, this cold, gleaming monument to power, made her feel like that 14-year-old again. She forced herself to uncross her ankles, to plant her feet firmly on the marble floor, to straighten her spine. She was good at her job. She was exceptional at her job. She had dressed senators' wives, and tech billionaires' girlfriends, and one very famous actress who'd cried in her fitting room because Alessia was the first person who'd ever made her feel beautiful instead of just thin. She belonged here. The door to the inner offices swung open, and a man emerged. He was handsome in the way that expensive suits and personal trainers made men handsome. Sharp jaw, white teeth, eyes that assessed her like she was a piece of furniture that had been delivered to the wrong address. "Miss Moretti, I'm Julian Cross, Director of Public Relations for the Castellano organization." He didn't offer his hand. "Come with me." She followed him down a corridor lined with abstract art that probably cost more than her apartment, her low heels sinking into carpet, so plush it felt like walking on a cloud. Julian Cross walked fast, and he didn't look back to see if she was keeping up. She was, though. She'd learned to keep up with people who wanted her to fall behind. His office was all glass walls and chrome fixtures, with a view of the city that stretched all the way to the harbor. He settled behind his desk and gestured for her to take the chair opposite. It was a low chair, deliberately low, the kind that forced visitors to look up at him. Alessia recognized the power play immediately. She'd spent years studying body language, spatial dynamics, the unspoken architecture of dominance and submission. She sat down without breaking eye contact, crossing her legs at the ankle, keeping her posture open. "So," Julian said, folding his hands on the desk, "you come highly recommended. The Contessa di Napoli's personal stylist for 3 years. The wardrobe consultant for Senator Whitmore's entire family. Quite impressive credentials. Thank you. Don't thank me yet." His smile was thin and didn't reach his eyes. "This is a different kind of assignment, Miss Moretti. Our principal, Mr. Castellano, has recently been the subject of some unfortunate press. You may have seen the coverage." She had. Everyone had. 6 months ago, a journalist named Elena Voss had published an explosive exposé alleging that Dominic Castellano, the head of the Castellano family empire, had been involved in everything from money laundering to witness intimidation. The evidence was circumstantial but damning. Photographs, leaked documents, testimony from anonymous sources. The Castellano legal machine had gone into overdrive. Lawsuits had been filed, retractions demanded, but the damage was done. Dominic Castellano had gone from being a shadowy figure of whispered respect to a tabloid villain. His face, dark-haired, dark-eyed, perpetually unsmiling, had been splashed across every news site in the country, always accompanied by words like monster, thug, crime lord. "I've seen it," Alessia said carefully. "Then you understand the challenge. Mr. Castellano needs a complete image overhaul. He needs to appear approachable, human, relatable." Julian said the word relatable like it tasted bad. The board believes that a change in his visual presentation could soften public perception. Clothing, grooming, posture, the whole package. That's where you come in. Alessia nodded slowly. "You want me to make a mafia boss look cuddly?" Julian's expression flickered. Surprise, maybe, or annoyance that she'd said the quiet part out loud. "I want you to make him look like someone the public can trust. Can you do that?" "I'd need to meet him first, assess his current presentation, his body language, his comfort level with different styles. Image consulting isn't just about clothes. It's about understanding the person inside them."
"Of course."
Julian stood abruptly.
"Let's go meet him now. He's in the penthouse."
The penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of the Castellano Tower. The elevator required a special key, which Julian produced from his pocket, with a flourish that felt performative. As they ascended, Alessia studied him, the way he held his shoulders, the slight tension in his jaw, the way his eyes kept flicking to his phone. He was nervous, she realized. Not about her, specifically, but about something. The meeting, his boss, something else entirely. The elevator opened directly into a living room that looked like it had been designed by someone who hated joy. Everything was black, gray, or chrome. The windows were floor to ceiling, showing the city sprawled below like a glittering circuit board. And standing in front of those windows, silhouetted against the afternoon light, was Dominic Castellano. He was taller than she'd expected, broader. The photographs hadn't captured the sheer physical presence of him. The width of his shoulders, the thickness of his hands, the way he occupied space, like he owned it because he did. His hair was dark and slightly too long, curling at his collar. His suit was expensive but ill-fitting, the jacket pulling across his back, the trousers slightly too short. He turned when they entered, and his eyes, dark as obsidian, utterly unreadable, found hers immediately. "Mr. Castellano," Julian said, his voice shifting into something more deferential. "This is Alessia Moretti, the stylist I told you about." Dominic Castellano looked at her, really looked at her, the way the receptionist had, but different, slower, more thorough, less dismissive. His gaze traveled from her face down her body and back up again, and Alessia felt heat rise to her cheeks. Not embarrassment, exactly. Something else. Something she didn't want to name. "This is the stylist?" His voice was deep, rough at the edges, with the faintest trace of an accent she couldn't quite place. Italian, maybe, but softened by years of American English. "Yes, sir." Dominic's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "She doesn't look like a stylist." Alessia felt the words land like a slap. She'd heard variations of this her entire career. "You don't look like a stylist. You don't look like you belong in fashion. How can you dress other people when you look like that?" She'd learned to deflect, to smile, to prove herself through her work. But something about the way he said it, not cruel exactly, but curious, made her decide not to deflect. "What does a stylist look like, Mr. Castellano?" Julian made a small choking sound. Dominic's eyebrow rose a fraction of an inch. "Most of the ones I've met look like they've never eaten a full meal in their lives. Then you've been hiring the wrong stylists. The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. 4, 5. Then Dominic Castellano laughed, a short, surprised sound, like a cough he hadn't expected. Maybe I have. He walked toward her, and she had to resist the urge to step back. He stopped about 2 feet away, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something woody and dark, with an undertone of smoke. Julian says you're the best. Is he right? I'm very good at my job. Modest, too. Modesty is overrated. Results aren't. He studied her for another long moment, and she forced herself to hold his gaze. His eyes were extraordinary up close. Not just dark, but layered, with flecks of amber that caught the light. They were also exhausted. She could see it in the shadows beneath them, the faint redness at the corners. This was a man who wasn't sleeping. Fine, he said finally. You're hired. Julian will handle the paperwork. I expect you to start tomorrow. I'll need to do a full assessment first. Your current wardrobe, your public appearances, your body language patterns. I'll also need to understand your goals. Not just what Julian wants, but what you want. What image are you trying to project? Dominic glanced at Julian, something unreadable passing between them. Julian will brief you on all of that. With respect, Mr. Castellano, Julian isn't the one who has to wear the clothes, or face the cameras, or convince the public that he's not the monster they think he is. Julian's face tightened. Miss Moretti, I don't think. She's right. Dominic cut him off without looking at him. His eyes were still on Alessia. Fine. We'll talk tomorrow. Alone. He turned and walked back toward the windows. A clear dismissal. Julian, show Miss Moretti out, and get her whatever she needs. In the elevator, Julian didn't speak for a full 30 seconds. Then he turned to her with a smile that was all teeth. Well, you certainly made an impression. Is that a problem? Not at all. I admire confidence. The way he said it made it sound like a threat. I'll have my assistant send over the contract and the background materials. Mr. Castellano's schedule, his upcoming public appearances, the key messaging we're trying to convey. You'll find it's quite comprehensive. I'm sure I will. The elevator doors opened on the ground floor. Julian didn't walk her out. Alessia crossed the lobby alone, feeling the receptionist's eyes on her back, and didn't let herself exhale until she was outside on the sidewalk, the city noise rushing in to fill the silence. She'd done it. She'd gotten the job. So why did she feel like she'd just walked into a trap? The next morning, Alessia arrived at the Castellano Tower at 7:45 a.m., 15 minutes early. She'd spent the previous evening reviewing the materials Julian's assistant had sent over. A thick digital dossier full of press clippings, public appearance schedules, and key messaging documents that read like they'd been written by a committee of people who'd never had an authentic human interaction. The messaging was all wrong. It was defensive, aggressive, full of legalistic language that made Dominic sound guilty even when he was proclaiming his innocence. Whoever was handling his PR was either incompetent or deliberately sabotaging him. She was escorted to a different office this time, smaller, windowless, with a rack of Dominic's suits already waiting for her. She spent the first hour going through them, piece by piece, cataloging fabrics, cuts, labels. The suits were all expensive. Brioni, Keaton, Zegna, but they were the wrong suits for his body type. Too slim in the shoulders, too short in the arms, the trousers cut for a man 3 inches taller. He looked like he was wearing someone else's clothes, which, in a way, he was. Someone had been dressing him for an image that wasn't his. At 9 a.m. sharp, the door opened and Dominic walked in. He was wearing another ill-fitting suit, this one charcoal gray, with a faint pinstripe. His tie was slightly crooked. His hair was still too long. He looked like a man who'd slept maybe 4 hours. Miss Moretti. Mr. Castellano. Please, sit down. He raised an eyebrow at her tone. She'd used her professional voice, the one that brooked no argument, but he sat in the chair she indicated. She circled him slowly, taking in every detail. The way he held his shoulders, slightly hunched, defensive. The way his hands rested on his thighs, fingers curled inward, protective. The way his jaw was perpetually clenched, even when he wasn't speaking. "You carry tension in your shoulders and jaw," she said. "It makes you look aggressive, even when you're relaxed. The public reads that as hostility. Maybe I am hostile. Maybe. But you don't want them to know that." His mouth twitched. "Fair point. Your suits are the wrong cut for your body. You have broad shoulders and a developed chest, probably from boxing or some kind of combat training. But your jackets are cut for a slimmer frame. It makes them pull across your back and bunch at the shoulders. It looks like you're wearing a costume. I've been using the same tailor for 10 years. Then your tailor doesn't know how to dress you, or doesn't want to." Dominic's eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" Alessia paused. She'd been turning over a theory in her mind since last night, and it was a dangerous theory to voice aloud. But she'd never been good at keeping her mouth shut. Someone in your organization is managing your public image, your suits, your messaging, your public appearances, and they're doing a terrible job. Either they're incompetent, which is a problem, or they're doing it on purpose, which is a bigger problem. You think someone is sabotaging me? I think your suits don't fit. Your press releases sound like legal threats, and your body language screams guilty. Either someone is bad at their job, or someone wants you to look bad." Dominic was silent for a long moment. Then he stood up, and suddenly he was very close, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "You've been here 1 day," he said quietly, "and you're already accusing my people of sabotage." "I'm not accusing anyone. I'm observing. That's what you hired me to do." "I hired you to pick out clothes." "No. You hired me to fix your image. Clothes are just the starting point." Another long silence. Then Dominic stepped back, and some of the tension went out of his shoulders. "Fine. What do you need?" "Access. I need to attend your meetings, your public appearances, your strategy sessions. I need to see how you interact with people, how they interact with you. I need to understand the full picture before I can change any part of it. That's a lot of access." "That's the job." He studied her for another moment, then nodded slowly. "I'll tell Julian to add you to the schedule. You'll shadow me for the next week. After that, I want a full report. What's wrong, how to fix it, and how long it'll take. You'll have it." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Miss Moretti?" "Yes?" "The tailor. The one who's been dressing me for 10 years. His name is Enzo Ricci. He's been with my family since I was a child. He knew my father." He paused. "If you're right about him, I want to know. And if I'm wrong, then I'll know you're not as smart as you think you are." He left, and Alessia let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. This was going to be more complicated than she'd thought. Over the next week, Alessia became a shadow. She attended meetings in glass-walled conference rooms, where men in expensive suits talked about shipping routes and import licenses, and things that sounded legal, but probably weren't. She sat in the corner of Dominic's office while he took phone calls in Italian, his voice shifting from cold to furious to cold again. She watched him at a charity gala, standing stiffly in a corner, while Julian worked the room, his body language so closed off that no one dared approach him. She watched the way people looked at him, fear, mostly, but also something else, curiosity, fascination. He was handsome and dangerous and rich, and people were drawn to that, even when they knew they shouldn't be. She also watched Julian. The PR director was smooth, polished, always saying the right things to the right people. But Alessia noticed things others might have missed. The way his smile never reached his eyes. The way he positioned himself in photographs, always slightly in front of Dominic, as if he were the one in charge. The way he spoke to the press, deflecting questions with legal jargon, never letting Dominic speak for himself, controlling the narrative so tightly that nothing authentic ever slipped through. On the fourth day, she found the tailor. Enzo Ricci's shop was in the old Italian neighborhood, a narrow storefront wedged between a bakery and a wine shop. The windows were dusty, the sign faded, but inside, it was like stepping into another era. Bolts of fabric lined the walls, rich wools and silks in colors that made Alessia's fingers itch to touch them. An old man looked up from his work table as she entered, his face creased with decades of smiles and frowns. "You're the new stylist," he said. His accent was thick, his English careful. "The one who thinks my suits are wrong. I'm the one who thinks someone is dressing Dominic Castellano to look like a thug instead of a businessman." Enzo's hands stilled on the fabric he was cutting. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he set down his shears and gestured for her to sit. "You're smarter than you look. I get that a lot." He laughed, a dry, papery sound. Dominic's father, God rest his soul, was a good man. A complicated man, but a good one. He understood that power isn't just about force, it's about perception. He dressed like a king because he wanted people to treat him like one. Enzo reached under his work table and pulled out a worn leather album. "Look." Alessia opened the album. Inside were photographs, old ones, black and white and faded color, of a man who looked remarkably like Dominic. The same dark eyes, the same strong jaw. But this man was smiling. He was wearing suits that fit him perfectly, standing with politicians and businessmen and beautiful women, looking like he belonged among them, looking like someone you'd trust. This is Dominic's father, Matteo Castellano. He understood image. He understood that a man who looks like a gentleman can do things a thug cannot. Enzo's voice grew bitter. But Dominic, he doesn't listen. He lets that Julian Cross tell him what to wear, what to say, how to stand. Julian sends me measurements, wrong measurements, and tells me to make the suits a certain way. I've tried to tell Dominic, but he trusts Julian. Julian saved his life once, or so the story goes. Alessia's heart was beating faster now. Julian gives you the measurements, not Dominic directly? For the past 2 years, ever since the scandal started, Julian says Dominic is too busy, that I should go through him. And the measurements he sends. Enzo shook his head. They're wrong. Deliberately wrong. I've been a tailor for 50 years. I know when someone is giving me bad numbers. Why didn't you say something? To who? Dominic won't see me. His assistants block my calls. Julian says, Dominic is happy with the suits. What am I supposed to do? Alessia closed the album gently. Can I borrow this? Enzo looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Bring it back when you're done. And tell Dominic. Tell him his father would be ashamed of how he's let them dress him. That night, Alessia sat in her small apartment, the album open on her coffee table, her laptop beside her, showing Julian Cross's press releases, side by side with the negative media coverage. She'd been trained in image analysis, not just clothes, but the deeper patterns of perception, body language, color psychology, the subtle cues that made people trust or distrust someone on an instinctive level. And what she was seeing was a coordinated campaign to destroy Dominic Castellano's public image. The suits made him look like a caricature of a mobster. The press releases made him sound guilty. The public appearances were scheduled at events where he'd be out of place, uncomfortable, defensive. Every photograph showed him scowling, closed off, threatening. And Julian Cross was at the center of all of it. She needed more proof. And she needed to tell Dominic. The next morning, she requested a private meeting. Dominic's assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Carla, who seemed to genuinely like her boss, scheduled it for that afternoon. At 3 p.m., Alessia walked into Dominic's office, carrying the album and her laptop. "You have your report?" Dominic asked. He was standing by the windows again, his back to her. "I have more than a report. I have a warning." He turned. "What kind of warning?" "Someone is deliberately sabotaging your public image. Your suits are being made to the wrong measurements. Measurements provided by Julian Cross. Your press releases are written in language designed to make you sound guilty and defensive. Your public appearances are scheduled at events where you'll look out of place and threatening. Every aspect of your public presentation is being manipulated to make you look like exactly the monster the press says you are." Dominic's expression didn't change. "You're accusing Julian. I'm presenting evidence. What you do with it is your decision." She opened the album first. "This is your father. Look at how he dressed. Look at how he stood. Look at how people responded to him." She pointed to photograph after photograph. He understood that image is power. Someone has been making sure you don't have that power. Then she opened her laptop. "Here are the press releases Julian has approved over the past 6 months. Every single one uses defensive language, legal threats, and aggressive posturing. They make you sound like a man with something to hide." She pulled up another file. "Here are the public appearances he's scheduled for you. A boxing match, a cigar bar opening, a private club known for its unsavory clientele. Every event reinforces the mob boss image instead of countering it." Dominic was very still. "And the suits?" "I visited Enzo Ricci. He told me Julian has been providing your measurements for the past 2 years. Measurements that are deliberately wrong. Your jackets are too tight in the shoulders, too short in the arms. Your trousers are the wrong length. You look like you're wearing a costume because someone wants you to look like a caricature." "Why would Julian do this?" "I don't know yet, but I have a theory." "Tell me." Alessia took a deep breath. The journalist who broke the original story, Elena Voss. She had inside sources. Someone in your organization fed her information. Someone who had access to your schedule, your business dealings, your vulnerabilities. Someone who's been systematically destroying your reputation while pretending to protect it. Dominic's jaw tightened. "You think Julian is the leak. I think you should investigate him, quietly, before he realizes you're onto him." For a long moment, Dominic didn't speak. He walked to his desk, picked up a heavy crystal paperweight, and turned it over in his hands. Alessia could see the muscles in his forearms tensing, the barely controlled violence in his grip. When he spoke, his voice was very quiet. "Julian Cross has worked for me for 8 years. He's been in my home. He's met my mother. He saved my life during the Marchetti hit 5 years ago. Took a bullet meant for me. That doesn't mean he's loyal now." "No." Dominic set the paperweight down carefully. "It doesn't." He looked at her, and something in his expression had shifted. The exhaustion was still there, but underneath it was something sharper, something dangerous. "You've given me a lot to think about, Miss Moretti. In the meantime, I want you to do what you were hired to do. Fix my image. Start with the suits. I'll need to work with Enzo directly. No more measurements from Julian. Done. I'll have Carla arrange it. And I need to be involved in your press strategy. The messaging needs to change completely." "Julian won't like that." "Julian doesn't have to like it. He just has to not sabotage it." Dominic's mouth curved into something that was almost a smile. "You're very direct, Miss Moretti. You're paying me for results, not flattery." "Fair enough." He walked toward her, stopping closer than was strictly professional. I'm going to investigate Julian, quietly, like you said. In the meantime, you're going to keep doing what you're doing. And if you're right about him, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. What happens if I'm wrong? Then, you've made a powerful enemy for no reason. His eyes held hers. Are you sure enough to risk that? Alessia thought about the album, the photographs of Matteo Castellano looking like a king. She thought about Enzo's bitter voice, the wrong measurements, the press releases that read like confessions. She thought about Julian's smile that never reached his eyes. I'm sure, she said. Over the next 3 weeks, Alessia transformed Dominic Castellano's image. She worked with Enzo to create a new wardrobe, suits that fit his body perfectly, in colors that softened his intensity without diminishing his authority. Deep navy instead of black, charcoal with subtle texture, crisp white shirts with collars that framed his face instead of swallowing it. She taught him how to stand, shoulders back but relaxed, hands visible, chin level. She coached him on facial expressions, on the subtle difference between looking serious and looking threatening. She rewrote his press statements, stripping out the legal jargon and replacing it with clear, direct language that sounded human. Julian fought her every step of the way. He questioned her choices in meetings, undermined her recommendations to Dominic, and once, she was sure of it, deliberately scheduled a press appearance without telling her. But Dominic backed her up every time, and slowly, incrementally, the public perception began to shift. A photograph of Dominic at a children's hospital charity event went viral, not because he looked threatening, but because he looked approachable. He was smiling, actually smiling, and the suit he was wearing made him look like a successful businessman instead of a mobster. The comments were confused, but positive. Is this the same guy? He looks normal? Okay. But why is the Mafia boss kind of hot now? Alessia read the comments with a mixture of satisfaction and anxiety. The image transformation was working, but she knew it was only a matter of time before Julian realized she was onto him, if he hadn't already. She got her answer on a Thursday afternoon. She was in the small office Dominic had given her, reviewing footage from his latest press appearance, when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop digging. You won't like what you find. She stared at the screen for a long moment, her heart hammering. Then she forwarded the text to Dominic and went back to work. That evening, Dominic summoned her to his penthouse. When she arrived, he was standing by the windows, his usual position. But something was different. The tension in his shoulders was sharper, more focused. He turned when she entered, and his eyes were dark with fury. You were right, he said without preamble. About Julian, about everything. Alessia's breath caught. You found proof. My people have been watching him for 2 weeks. He's been meeting with Elena Voss. He's been feeding her information for over a year. Schedules, business details, personal vulnerabilities. He's also been in contact with the Marchetti family. Dominic's voice was flat, controlled, but Alessia could hear the rage underneath it. The Marchettis are paying him. They want to destroy me, my reputation, my business, my alliances. Julian was their inside man. What are you going to do? I'm going to handle it. The way he said it made it clear she didn't want to know the details. But first, I'm going to use him. Use him how? There's a press conference scheduled for next week. Julian has been planning it for months. He says, it's an opportunity for me to set the record straight about the allegations. But I've seen the briefing documents. The questions he's prepared are traps. He's going to try to make me lose control in front of the cameras, confirm everything the press has been saying about me. Alessia nodded slowly. So we turn the trap around. Exactly. Dominic's eyes met hers. I need you to help me prepare. You understand how he thinks, how he operates. You can anticipate his moves. I can do that. I know you can. He stepped closer, and suddenly the air between them felt charged. You've done more for me in 3 weeks than Julian did in 8 years. You saw what no one else saw. You told me the truth when everyone else was lying. That's my job. No, his voice was softer now. Your job was to pick out clothes. You did something else entirely. Alessia didn't know what to say to that. She was acutely aware of how close he was, of the heat radiating from his body, of the way his eyes had softened from fury to something else, something that made her pulse quicken. After the press conference, Dominic said, I'm going to make some changes. Julian will be gone. I'll need a new PR director, someone I can trust. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a position. Strategic Communications Director. You'd have full control over my public image, my messaging, my media strategy, and you'd be paid accordingly. Alessia thought about it. Working for a Mafia boss, even one she was increasingly certain wasn't the monster the press made him out to be, was a dangerous proposition. But she'd never been one to run from danger. And there was something about Dominic Castellano, something underneath the hard exterior, that made her want to stay. I'll consider it, she said, after the press conference. Fair enough. The week leading up to the press conference was the most intense of Alessia's career. She and Dominic spent hours every day preparing, going over potential questions, practicing responses, drilling body language and tone. She taught him how to pivot from hostile questions, how to use silence as a weapon, how to project calm even when he was angry. She also worked with his security team to identify potential threats, both physical and reputational. Julian, unaware that he'd been discovered, continued to play his role. He sent Alessia condescending emails about appropriate messaging and scheduled meetings to align on strategy. She played along, nodding and smiling, and taking notes, all while feeding information back to Dominic. The night before the press conference, she couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, running through every possible scenario. What if Julian had a backup plan? What if the Marchettis had something else planned? What if she'd missed something crucial? Her phone buzzed. A text from Dominic. Can't sleep either. Come up? She should have said no. She should have maintained professional boundaries. But instead, she found herself pulling on clothes and taking the elevator to the penthouse. Dominic was waiting for her in the living room, dressed in casual clothes, a soft gray sweater and dark pants that made him look younger, more vulnerable. He had a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses on the coffee table. I thought you didn't drink before public appearances, she said. 1 glass won't hurt. He poured for both of them. I wanted to thank you. Whatever happens tomorrow, you've already changed things for me. You made me see things I was blind to. You would have figured it out eventually. Maybe, maybe not. He handed her a glass, his fingers brushing hers. I've been surrounded by yes-men and sycophants for so long, I forgot what honesty looked like. Alessia took a sip of whiskey, letting the warmth spread through her chest. Honesty is overrated. Results aren't. He laughed, a real laugh this time, not the surprised cough from their first meeting. You're something else, Alessia Moretti. So I've been told. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking their whiskey, the city lights glittering below them. Alessia was acutely aware of his presence beside her, the warmth of his body, the scent of his cologne, the way his knee was almost touching hers. She thought about the way he'd looked at her earlier, the way his voice had softened when he'd offered her the job. She thought about how much she wanted to stay. Dominic, tomorrow, when this is over, I'll take the job. He turned to look at her, and something in his expression shifted. Yeah? Yeah. He reached out and took her hand, his fingers warm and rough against hers. Good, he said quietly. That's good. They stayed like that for a long moment, hands intertwined. The city sprawled below them. Alessia felt something shift in her chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. The press conference was held in the grand ballroom of the Castellano-owned Hotel Vittoria. The room was packed with journalists, cameras, and the kind of tense energy that preceded a public execution. Alessia stood in the wings, watching as the room filled up, her heart pounding. She'd dressed Dominic herself that morning, a deep navy suit that fit him perfectly, a pale blue shirt that softened his coloring, no tie. He looked powerful but approachable, serious but not threatening. He looked like a man you could trust. Julian was already on stage, warming up the crowd with practiced ease. He looked confident, almost smug, and Alessia felt a cold knot of anger in her stomach. He thought he was about to destroy Dominic. He had no idea what was coming. Dominic appeared beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. Ready? Are you? I've been ready for this for a long time. He looked at her, and for a moment, the mask slipped. Thank you for everything. Thank me after. He nodded, then walked onto the stage. The cameras flashed. The room fell silent. Julian stepped up to the podium first. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Mr. Castellano has prepared a brief statement, after which we'll open the floor to questions. He stepped aside, and Dominic took his place. Dominic looked out at the sea of faces, and Alessia watched his body language carefully. Shoulders back but relaxed. Hands resting lightly on the podium. Chin level. Eye contact with the audience. He looked calm, confident, in control. Good morning, he said, his voice steady. I'm here today to address the allegations that have been made against me and my organization over the past several months. I've remained silent until now on the advice of my legal team, but I've come to believe that silence can be mistaken for guilt. So let me be clear. The allegations are false. They are part of a coordinated campaign by my business rivals to destroy my reputation and my company, and I have evidence to prove it. The room erupted in murmurs. Julian's expression flickered. Surprise. Then something sharper. This wasn't in the script. Dominic continued, his voice growing stronger. I'm not a perfect man. I've made mistakes. I've done things I'm not proud of. But I am not the monster that certain people have made me out to be. And I'm here today to set the record straight. He paused, letting the silence build. Then he looked directly at Julian. But before I take your questions, there's something I need to address. Something that concerns someone in this room. Julian's face went pale. Dominic, I don't think. Julian Cross has been my director of public relations for 8 years, Dominic said, cutting him off. He's been in my home. He's met my family. He saved my life once, and for the past 2 years, he's been working for my enemies. The room exploded. Cameras flashed wildly. Journalists shouted questions. Julian took a step back, his face a mask of shock and fury. That's absurd! Julian's voice was shrill. This is a baseless accusation. I have evidence, Dominic said calmly. Bank records showing payments from the Marchetti family. Phone records showing calls to the journalist Elena Voss. Emails containing confidential information about my business dealings. All of it will be turned over to the authorities. Security guards appeared at the edges of the stage. Julian looked around wildly, his composure completely shattered. You can't do this. You have no proof. I have all the proof I need. Dominic's voice was cold now, the mask of approachability gone. You're done, Julian. Leave now, or I'll have you removed." For a moment, Julian looked like he might fight. Then his shoulders slumped, and the fight went out of him. He walked off the stage, flanked by security guards, and the room watched him go in stunned silence. Dominic turned back to the audience. "I apologize for that interruption. Now, I believe you have questions." The questions came fast and furious, but Alessia had prepared him for every single one. He answered them calmly, directly, without defensiveness or aggression. He admitted to mistakes without sounding guilty. He deflected hostile questions with grace. He projected the image of a man who had nothing to hide, because, in that moment, he didn't. Alessia watched from the wings, her heart soaring. He was doing it. He was actually doing it. The journalists were still skeptical, but the tone of the questions was shifting. They were treating him like a legitimate businessman instead of a cartoon villain. The transformation she'd been working toward for weeks was happening in real time. After 45 minutes, Dominic wrapped up the conference. "Thank you for your time. I'll be making myself available for follow-up questions in the coming weeks. For now, I have work to do." He walked off the stage to a barrage of camera flashes. The moment he was out of sight, his composure cracked, just slightly. He found Alessia in the wings, and the look on his face was something she'd never seen before. Relief, gratitude, something deeper. "We did it," he said. "You did it. I just helped." He shook his head. "No, you did more than help. You saved me." Before she could respond, he pulled her into his arms. It wasn't a romantic embrace. It was the desperate hug of a man who'd been drowning and had finally found solid ground. Alessia wrapped her arms around him and held on. "Thank you," he murmured into her hair. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." They stood like that for a long moment, the noise of the dispersing press conference fading around them. Then Dominic pulled back, his hands still on her shoulders. "I meant what I said. The job is yours. Strategic Communications Director. Whatever salary you want, whatever resources you need. I'll hold you to that. I hope you do." He looked at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "I hope you stay for a long time, Alessia." "I'm not going anywhere," she said. And she meant it. In the weeks that followed, the Castellano organization underwent a dramatic transformation. Julian Cross was arrested on charges of corporate espionage and conspiracy. Dominic had turned over his evidence to the FBI, a move that shocked everyone who knew him. The Marchetti family, exposed as the source of the smear campaign, faced their own legal troubles. And Dominic Castellano, once the most hated man in the city, began to rebuild his reputation. Alessia led the charge. She crafted a new public image for Dominic, not as a mobster trying to look legitimate, but as a legitimate businessman with a complicated past. She booked him on talk shows and podcasts, arranged interviews with reputable journalists, positioned him as a voice of authority on business and leadership. She also worked behind the scenes to reshape the company's culture, pushing for transparency and accountability. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, scandals, moments when the old Dominic threatened to resurface. But every time, Alessia was there, not just as his strategist, but as his partner. They worked late nights together, argued over strategy, celebrated victories, small and large. And somewhere along the way, the professional relationship began to shift into something more. It happened gradually, a hand on her shoulder that lingered too long, a late-night dinner that felt more like a date than a business meeting, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. Alessia tried to ignore it, tried to maintain boundaries, but Dominic Castellano was not a man who was easily ignored. One evening, 6 months after the press conference, he invited her to the penthouse for a strategy meeting. When she arrived, she found the lights dimmed, candles on the table, and a dinner that had clearly been prepared by a professional chef. "This doesn't look like a strategy meeting," she said. "It's not." Dominic was standing by the windows, dressed in one of the suits she'd chosen for him, a dark burgundy that made him look almost soft. "I've been wanting to talk to you about something personal." Alessia's heart began to pound. "Dominic, let me say this." He crossed the room to stand in front of her. "You came into my life when I was at my lowest point. Everyone around me was lying to me, using me, trying to destroy me. And you, a woman I'd never met, a woman who had every reason to be afraid of me. You told me the truth. You saw me, not the monster the press made me out to be, not the boss my employees were afraid of, just me." "Dominic, I'm not good at this," he said, his voice rough. "I've spent my whole life building walls, but you walked right through them, and I don't want you to leave." "I'm not leaving. I told you that. I don't want you to stay as my employee." He took her hands, his grip warm and steady. "I want you to stay as something more. I know this is complicated. I know I'm not an easy man to love, but I'm asking you to try, to give me a chance." Alessia looked up at him, this dangerous, complicated, infuriating man who had somehow become the center of her world. She thought about everything they'd been through together, everything they'd built together. She thought about the way he made her feel, seen, valued, powerful. She thought about how much she wanted to say yes. "Okay," she said. His eyes widened. "Okay? Okay, I'll give you a chance, but I have conditions." "Name them." "No more secrets, no more walls. If we're doing this, we're doing it honestly. Deal. And you have to let me keep dressing you. Your fashion sense is terrible without me." He laughed, that surprised, delighted laugh that she'd come to love. "Deal." He kissed her then, and it was nothing like she'd imagined. It was gentle, almost hesitant, as if he was afraid she might break. She pulled him closer, deepening the kiss, and felt him relax against her. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "I've wanted to do that for months," he admitted. "Why didn't you?" "I was afraid you'd say no. I'm not in the habit of saying no to things I want." He smiled, a real smile, the kind that transformed his whole face. "I'm starting to figure that out about you." They had dinner together that night, and it was the beginning of something new, something fragile and terrifying and wonderful. Alessia knew it wouldn't be easy. Dominic's world was still dangerous, his enemies still numerous, his past still complicated. But she'd never been one to run from a challenge. A year later, Alessia Moretti stood on the balcony of the Castellano Tower, looking out at the city she'd come to think of as home. She was wearing a dress she'd designed herself, deep green silk that hugged her curves and made her feel like a queen. Beside her, Dominic was fielding calls from journalists who wanted interviews, politicians who wanted favors, businessmen who wanted partnerships. The Castellano organization was thriving, its reputation restored, its future secure. And Alessia was at the center of it all. Not just as Dominic's strategist, not just as his partner, but as his equal. She'd built something here, a career, a relationship, a life. She'd taken a job that was supposed to be a joke and turned it into a position of real power. The curvy stylist who was supposed to fail had become the most dangerous woman in the room. She smiled, watching the sun set over the city, and felt Dominic's arm slide around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How far we've come." "We? Yes, we. You didn't do this alone, Dominic Castellano." "No," he agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I didn't. I had you." She leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her back. "And you always will." Is that a promise? It's a guarantee. He laughed softly. I love you, Alessia Moretti. I love you too, Dominic. Below them, the city glittered and hummed, full of secrets and dangers and possibilities. But up here, on the 47th floor of the Castellano Tower, there was only the two of them, the Mafia boss and his curvy stylist, the man who'd been saved and the woman who'd saved him, building a future together, one perfectly fitted suit at a time.